Good evening, everybody. Breaking tonight, President Trump making his first on-camera comments about the race for the Alabama Senate seat. President Trump, upon his return from his trip to Asia last week, had been quoted as saying the race for the Senate seat should be left to the people of Alabama. Today, he recognized the importance of the seat remaining with the Republican Party, and now he says it's just too important to have a liberal Democrat take it. We'll have the full report for you. Also tonight, new sexual harassment allegations against another Democrat, Congressman John Conyers, admitting he paid a settlement to a former female employee, but denies it was over sexual harassment. And late today, reports that a second woman is accusing Conyers of sexual harassment in court filings this year. And a deepening mystery surrounding a Border Patrol agent who was killed while on patrol over the weekend. The Border Patrol not handling the report of the agent's death and the injury to his partner on patrol with him in a professional and open manner. Far from it. The FBI says they are now investigating the death as a, quote, potential assault, end quote. But they aren't ruling out some reports today that the agent and his partner fell into a nearby culvert. So what in the world really did happen, and why isn't the Border Patrol being transparent about the death of one of their agents? We take that up here tonight. Our top story, President Trump making news on the hotly contested and scandal-ridden Alabama Senate race. President Trump and his family tonight are in Mar-a-Lago for their Thanksgiving holiday, but as President Trump was departing the White House, he addressed reporters, giving his first on-camera remarks since the Roy Moore scandal broke on November 9th. Fox News White House correspondent Kevin Corke with our report.
He totally denies it. He says it didn't happen. And, you know, you have to listen to him also. You're talking about, he said 40 years ago this did not happen.
In making his first public comment since the scandal broke involving the Alabama Republican senatorial candidate, President Trump today refused to endorse Judge Roy Moore. But he didn't call for him to withdraw from the race either.
Roy Moore denies it. And by the way, he gives a total denial. And I do have to say, 40 years is a long time. He's run 8 races, and this has never come up. So 40 years is a long time.
Moore has been accused of inappropriate contact with a minor nearly 4 decades ago, a charge he has repeatedly and strongly denied. The president's comments coming just ahead of his holiday vacation in Florida.
We had a great call with President Putin.
That call, the latest reflection of the administration's desire to thaw relations with Moscow, something the president has made clear is his preference. From his recent trip to Asia,
I think it's very important to get along with Russia. I feel that having Russia in a friendly posture as opposed to always fighting with them is an asset.
I think that can make a big difference.
To the campaign trail before taking office.
I hope that we get along great with Putin, because it would be great to have Russia with a good relationship.
A theme continued in this morning's conversation between the two leaders.
We're talking about peace in Syria, very important. We're talking about North Korea. We had a call that lasted almost an hour and a half.
Who, in addition to vowing to peacefully resolve the Syrian civil war, agreed on the importance of fighting terrorism together, said they hope to implement a lasting peace in Ukraine and to increase international pressure on North Korea. This on a day when the Russian leader met for nearly 3 hours with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in Sochi.
The most important question, of course, is what will happen after the defeat of the terrorists in terms of a peaceful political settlement.
We hope that Russia will succeed in achieving what it has been saying from the very beginning of the crisis, which is not allowing foreign intervention in any political matter in Syria.
The crisis will also be the focus of trilateral talks beginning tomorrow with the presidents of Russia, Iran, and Turkey. Lou, I have one more nugget about Roy Moore. The president was asked, no surprise, frankly, if he might get out there on the campaign trail and show his support in a very vocal way for the Alabama Republican before that big election, which of course is coming up on December 12th. In case you were wondering, no, the president was not committal. He didn't say he'd do it, but then again, he didn't say he wouldn't. He said that he would have more on that sometime next week, and for that we take him at his word, and we'll be watching and listening all the same. Lou, back to you.
As we always do. And as you say, it turns out that was a nugget. I thought there for a moment it was going to explode into something much bigger than a nugget. Kevin, nonetheless, thank you for that nugget. President Trump obviously taking a pragmatic approach to the Alabama Senate race. A Republican victory would at least assure the Senate GOP would preserve its majority by its current margin. It clearly will be a tough battle. Well, more tough battles. The president facing a tough battle in our federal courts where Obama-appointed judges are undercutting him and his policies, it seems, at every turn. One of those judges last night blocked the president's executive order cutting off funding to sanctuary cities. But that fight is far from ended. Fox News national correspondent William LaJeunesse with our report.
In January, President Trump signed an executive order saying sanctuary cities that fail to comply with federal law will not receive federal funds. Last night, a U.S. District Court judge ruled that unconstitutional, saying federal funding that bears no meaningful relationship to immigration enforcement cannot be threatened merely because a jurisdiction chooses an immigration enforcement strategy of which the president disapproves. That drew immediate fire from Trump supporters.
That order needs to be in place. And what you don't want to have, Bill, is sanctuary cities popping up that are going to be a safe haven or a harbor for those who are conducting illegal activity.
The ruling means the administration cannot claw back federal money or withhold new grant money from cities that refuse to help deport criminal aliens.
This is a backdoor attempt to coerce states and local governments to carry out federal immigration enforcement.
California stands to lose millions in federal aid as a sanctuary state, a policy many sheriffs oppose.
My fear is what's next. Are they going to restrict us from talking to the FBI or the DEA? We should have unfettered access and communication when we're trying to keep our communities safe.
The White House says it will appeal, calling Judge Oreck's ruling flawed. Oreck raised $200,000 for President Obama and personally gave $30,000 to committees supporting his campaign.
This judge is a politician. He's a bundler for Obama. He's made contributions before he was on the bench.
Judge Oreck raised two other points, saying the president cannot threaten to use defunding as a weapon. Secondly, the executive order jeopardizes all federal money, says the judge, education, highway, and welfare. Well, the DOJ says that is not accurate, that only please grant money is at risk, grants that cities apply for knowing they need to follow federal law to receive it. Lou?
William, thank you very much. William LaJeunesse. The FBI is now offering a reward up to $25,000 for information on what led to the death of a Border Patrol agent and serious injuries to another. This added to previous rewards that were posted. But federal officials aren't giving any specifics to the press on what happened to those agents. Fox News correspondent Casey Stiegel live in Dallas, Texas, with our report.
Those who knew U.S. Border Patrol agent Rogelio Martinez best say he was an adoring father who had dedicated his life to public service.
All he wanted to do was just help people and help the world and try to make a difference.
Emery Crawford grew up with Martinez in El Paso, Texas. He says the 36-year-old was the epitome of selflessness.
He would be the type of guy who give us the shirt off his back and wouldn't ask for anything in response.
Investigators say Agent Martinez and his partner were discovered in a culvert on Sunday, just off this busy interstate near the Texas-Mexico border. The feds now say both men sustained traumatic head injuries and broken bones, though how they were hurt is either yet not known or not being disclosed publicly.
We've been out aggressively pursuing every lead that we have, as well as processing the scene, which we are considering a crime scene.
Union reps with the National Border Patrol Council say both of their agents were attacked with rocks. They also say the agent who survived and remains hospitalized has zero recollection of what happened. This as friends and family prepare to honor Agent Rogelio Martinez and the ultimate sacrifice he made.
I just wish him the best. We rest in peace. I love him.
And tonight there remain so many unanswered questions, and we're told that is only complicating the grieving process, as you can imagine, for Martinez's family and also that agent who is unidentified for security reasons as he continues to fight for his life in the hospital in intensive care. Critical but stable condition tonight. Lou?
Well, we can pray for him and I give our condolences to the murdered agent's family. It is, Casey, this is the strangest, I would guess, press position stance taken by a federal agency that I can recall, and it's becoming more commonplace. We're seeing very few facts come out early. We're becoming very, if you will forgive me, Euro-like in our federal government, and it's disconcerting on a number of levels, because the public has a right to know who's at large and who is doing what to law enforcement agents.
Agreed entirely. And, you know, this is a situation where we've noticed they've been very, very careful about their wording. Nowhere did they use the word attack in that press conference this afternoon. They said that it was possibly, they were just using sort of ambiguous phrases. So it is a little bit unusual, but again, we're also in a time and age when news is flying at us at 100 miles per hour, and it does take time, as you well know, to carry out an investigation. My hope is that they're just not releasing stuff because they want to make sure their I's are dotted and their T's are crossed, but we'll just have to wait and see on that, Lou.
Let's hope that they are far more successful investigators than, to this point, bureaucrats. Casey, thanks so much. Casey Steve. We'll be right back with much more. Stay with us, a lot more ahead. President Trump is promising tax cuts by Christmas.
We're going to give the American people a huge tax cut for Christmas. Hopefully that will be a great, big, beautiful Christmas present.
But with the current Republican leadership, the bill's prospects remain to most unclear. And an outrageous report tonight revealing Congress has had for years a secret slush fund with which to pay off, among other things, sexual harassment claims, and never reveal a name. Just where are our taxpayer dollars going? We'll take that up with Congressman Ron DeSantis here next. Stay with us. A second woman now coming forward with sexual harassment claims against longtime Democratic Congressman John Conyers. Earlier today, Conyers admitted that he had settled a sexual harassment complaint in 2015, but denies the underlying accusations. I will leave it to you to sort out the meaning that is intended by the congressman. A former House employee says she was fired after rejecting his sexual advances. The $27,000 settlement was reportedly paid from Conyers' congressional office budget instead of that U.S. Treasury fund set up for that purpose, the Congressional Slush Fund. That secret Treasury slush fund, now under increasing scrutiny, created to essentially pay off claims of sexual harassment by members of Congress. It's all part of a little-known law that was passed more than 20 years ago, back in 1995, ironically called the Congressional Accountability Act. It established the Office of Compliance to handle all workplace complaints, including sexual harassment. More than $17 million has been paid out in more than 230 settlements by the Office of Compliance. Once a settlement is reached, that money never comes from individual members' offices, be they congressmen or senators. Instead, it's paid out of that special Treasury fund, taxpayer money, mind you, and there are no public disclosure requirements at all. In fact, the reverse. It is all about keeping secret the names, the money, and the violations. Victims have to sign non-disclosure agreements, and the lawmaker's identity remains confidential even if he or she is found guilty. That's what passes for accountability these days on Capitol Hill, and, of course, compliance with the law if you happen to be one of those making laws. Our next guest says payments to settle sexual harassment claims against members of Congress or staff should be made public, and the offenders should have to reimburse the Treasury for every dime. Joining me now, Congressman Ron DeSantis of Florida. He's a member of several key committees, including Foreign Affairs, Judiciary, and Oversight. He's a member as well of the Freedom Caucus. Congressman, it's great to have you with us. And I have to say, first of all, My compliments and my thanks for you having the guts to stand up and say what so few of your colleagues have said to this point, that it's an outrage that taxpayer dollars are being spent in this way, that Congress and the Senate have a secret slush fund. Your thoughts?
Well, one, taxpayers have a right to know how all their money is being spent. So we need to make all of this public. They need to see the claims. They need to see the identities of those who were responsible for the misconduct, and they need that information. Two, we should not have any taxpayer dollars going to bail out misconduct by members of Congress or members of congressional staff. It's a completely inappropriate use of taxpayer money. Those individuals should be personally liable for their own misconduct. And I think we've got to go back and look at some of these claims and then have those members who had the claims settled with taxpayer dollars, let's put them on the hook and make them reimburse the Treasury, because this really is an outrage when that's happening. And I also think what we have to do, Lou, you have the slush fund, which we have to defund. I think that's important. But what Conyers did, and I think you need effectively a Conyers rule, is he used his office budget, which is a separate pot of money, but he disguised the payment. So it didn't say payment for a sexual harassment claim. He paid this lady over 3 months. It looked like she was a normal employee. So he camouflaged those payments. I think that's wrong as well. So I think we need to make it all public. We need to bar taxpayer funds, but we do also need to implement a Conyers rule.
And we also should share with everyone, the Ethics Committee is taking up the case of Congressman Conyers, and an investigation will begin forthwith. There is so much here to investigate. First of all, the idea that that such a slush fund was ever created. This was in the Clinton era. It is Clinton-esque, I must say. But do you know why it was created? I mean, what was the point of this?
So there actually, part of the law, there were some good things in the law. Congress had actually been exempt from a lot of federal laws, civil rights laws, age discrimination laws, disability laws. And so the intent was, the reason why they said accountability was, let's make Congress live under some of those laws. I support that. I know you support that. That's a good idea. But it just shows you how the swamp works. So even when they're going in the right direction in some areas, they then are sneaking things like that in the back door. And so that obviously was something that is Washington at its worst.
Oh, absolutely. Let's turn to Uranium One. We are waiting for the informant, the FBI informant, who was an undercover asset for the FBI, an informant, a whistleblower, if you will, in some respects. We have been told that the gag order against him, the non-disclosure agreement, had been lifted by the Justice Department at the president's order. And yet now we hear the Justice Department is going to talk to you all about the informant and tell you what he's going to say as part of the process of actually getting him in front of the United States Congress. Tell me that's not what's going on.
We're going to investigate on our own in these committees, Lou. If the Justice Department wants to provide us information, that's fine, but we're doing our own investigation. He not only has testimony to offer, which is going to be very important, he's got a treasure trove of documents, he has recordings, and we've been given every indication that this is going to evince a pattern of corruption underlying this Uranium One deal. And the Justice Department has not exactly handled this very well throughout the years. You had a year and a half worth of evidence where there were felonies being committed prior to the approval of the Uranium One deal by the Obama administration, and yet no indictments were brought. We don't have any record that that Congress was notified or any of these other board members. So what was the FBI doing during those years? What was Holder's Justice Department doing during those years? This is not going to look good for them based on the information we've received thus far.
How soon do you believe the informant will be in front of Congress?
Well, I think he will be soon in terms of providing the documents, and then he's going to answer questions kind of in a private setting, because I think we're going to have to subpoena more people after that. When he testifies publicly, I'm not sure, but I do think he's going to give us a big private briefing first so that we get all the facts and that we can structure our investigation accordingly. And I think that that's going to happen after Thanksgiving.
And let me ask this last, we're over time, but I do want to get your thoughts on this. The special counsel, Robert Mueller, his investigation, Ty Cobb, one of the president's attorneys, saying he gets the sense that this is going to be a special counsel investigation that's going to end soon. We're seeing every other kind of contraindicator, a widening investigation, including within the Justice Department itself. Your thoughts about when is this nonsense, this witch hunt going to end?
It all goes back to the appointing order that Rod Rosenstein did. He did not even identify a crime to investigate in the original appointing order. Basically said, hey, look at the campaign in Russia. This gives people like Mueller the license to just try to find something. And that's not the way investigations should be conducted. Look, we've been doing this for a year and a half because Comey investigated this for a year. There's still no evidence of any Trump-Russia collusion. I think it's time that they put up or shut up. If there's no evidence, we've got to move on with the American people's business.
Why would not the Speaker of the House, the Senate Majority Leader, combine with the President of the United States and the heads of the committees of Senate Intelligence, House Intelligence, the two Judiciary Committees, and say, enough. This has gone on far too long.
That may be happening, Lou. I've been making that argument, and in the House Intel Committee, they ramped up over the last couple months. I think that they're pretty much done. I would anticipate something happening by the end of the year. I don't know exactly what they're going to report. I'm not on that committee, but every indication I've heard is the evidence is going to show no collusion.
Congressman Ron DeSantis, as always, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
On Wall Street, a record-breaking day for stocks. Investors cheering as the Dow soared 161 points. The S&P up 17, the Nasdaq up 72, all closing at new record highs, and volume picking up on the big board, 3.3 billion shares. Uber disclosing hackers stole the personal data of 57 million of its customers and drivers in what is, at the very least, a massive breach that the company hid from the public for more than a year. A reminder to listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast, on the Salem Radio Network. Up next, an Obama-appointed judge ruling against the president's crackdown on sanctuary cities, the leftist judiciary jeopardizing national security, and not with even a second thought. I take it up in my commentary tonight. We'll have that next, much more straight ahead. Stay with us. A few thoughts now on the leftist judiciary, the judiciary that's trying to subvert the Trump administration and its policies. Federal Judge William Orrick once again blocking the president's agenda and blocking specifically his executive order that cuts funding to sanctuary cities after a lawsuit brought by the cities of San Francisco and Santa Clara. This isn't the first time the Obama-appointed judge has interposed himself into policy targeting President Trump's sanctuary city executive order for a second time. Back in April, Judge Orrick put a temporary hold on the order, a hold the Trump administration is challenging in the leftist Ninth Circuit, the most liberal in the country, of course, and, of course, the majority of judges in both the U.S. District Court in Northern California and the Ninth Circuit were all appointed by Democratic presidents. But the leftist judiciary extends well beyond that. In fact, The Economist back in January called the courts, quote, the Democrats' last refuge. A Brookings analysis shows at the end of last year, more than half of all district court judges were appointed by Democratic presidents, approximately 35% appointed by Republicans. That same report shows 9 out of 13 circuit courts had a majority of Democratic appointees. Astonishing compared to just 1 back in 2008. But the good news is that President Trump inherited more than 2 times more judicial vacancies than did President Obama. With 144 vacancies right now, President Trump has a historic opportunity to turn the country's federal courts in a far more balanced and conservative direction. Our quotation of the evening, this one from Cicero, who said this, quote, the safety of the people shall be the highest law, were it only so. We're coming right back. Stay with us. President Trump and Vladimir Putin talking for an hour on the phone today.
We're talking very strongly about bringing peace to Syria. We're talking very strongly about North Korea and Ukraine.
We take up the president's foreign policy agenda with Ambassador John Bolton. And President Trump carrying on a White House tradition, exercising his powers of pardon for the first time, just in time for Thanksgiving. We'll tell you all about the lucky recipients here next. Stay with us. We'll be right back. The Treasury Department implementing new sanctions against North Korea and the companies doing business with the rogue nation. 3 Chinese firms responsible for hundreds of millions of dollars of transactions with Kim Jong-un among those targeted. The move comes a day after President Trump named North Korea a state sponsor of terror. Joining me now, former UN Ambassador John Bolton, American Enterprise Institute Senior Fellow, Fox Business contributor, and Ambassador, it is good to see you. These sanctions, we have talked about the efficacy of sanctions. We, as I recall, have never found an instance in which they actually worked. Is there some new evidence we should consider?
No, I mean, I think adding new sanctions adds to the pressure. There's no doubt about that, certainly politically. But these sanctions on North Korea, these individual targets, are never effective, because if you sanction the ABC company, it only takes a day or so before the XYZ company springs up doing exactly the same thing. I think the designation of North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism was the right thing to do for other reasons, but North Korea has resisted economic pressure successfully in the past. It will do so here again.
And we are now about 40 days away from the end of this year. The South Koreans have just said they believe that the North Koreans will have an ICBM with a nuclear warhead that can reach the United States by the end of this year, some 40 days. This is a very different proposition than the one we thought we were facing.
Yeah, we're out of time with North Korea. And, you know, Susan Rice, Barack Obama's national security advisor, very helpfully wrote about 6 or 8 weeks ago that, gee, after 25 years of trying to negotiate North Korea out of its nuclear weapons, guess we failed. And thanks, Susan. And guess now we just have to live with North Korea with nuclear weapons, and we'll do containment and deterrence as we did in the Cold War, as if North Korea is just like the Soviet Union, and as if we want to go back to duck and cover drills for elementary school children. I think the president's inherited a real mess. I think the same could be said about the Iran nuclear program. And he's got to make some very hard decisions if China doesn't step up and really do what they have the capability of doing. And whether it's the end of this year, as CIA Director Mike Pompeo said a short time ago, a matter of months, even if it's the end of next year, as these things go, we're out of time.
And as you say, as these things go, even though I can think of no other things quite like these, that seems a dangerous proposition if we do not understand when that ballistic missile will be ready with a nuclear warhead to fire on American targets.
Well, precisely. That's why you can't wait till the last minute. Our information is incomplete with respect to North Korea. It's radically incomplete. And that's why 25 years of Democratic and Republican administrations alike basically saying, we've got time to negotiate, there's more time, there's not any time left. And so the notion, as the State Department keeps saying, that maybe we'll get North Korea back to the table is a formula that guarantees North Korea will be able to strike any target it wants in the U.S. with a thermonuclear weapon in a very short period of time.
We're out of time, but one last question here tonight, if I may, and that is, does it seem to you the State Department is trying to cover up in the corrupt agreements that were made to keep uranium-1 away from the prying eyes of people concerned about national security, rather than simply, in the instance of CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment, simply to rubber stamp the idea?
Yeah, I think there's a lot we don't know about how this decision was made. I think there are credible allegations of efforts at corruption by the Russian government, and I think a little transparency here from the State Department, out of character generally, but it would be a good thing for the country.
Yes, and I don't suppose anyone would hold their breath on that prospect.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't.
Ambassador John Bolton, as always, great to have you here.
Thank you, Lou.
President Trump making Thanksgiving great again for two lucky turkeys named, ironically, Drumstick and Wishbone. Here's the president exercising his pardoning powers, and if I may say so, with zest and gusto.
Are you ready, Drumstick? Okay. Drumstick, you are hereby pardoned.
There should have been a flourish of trumpets and drums, and something should have come out there. Drumstick and Wishbone, nonetheless, get to live out the rest of their lives at a Virginia farm. Up next, President Trump stepping up pressure on Congress to fund the border wall after the death of a Border Patrol agent. Sebastian Gorka joins us here next. We take that up and much more. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Joining me now, Fox News national security strategist, contributor, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Great to have you with us. And let's turn first to this new intelligence from the South Koreans. How reliable, I don't know. I don't know how reliable much intelligence is these days. But the South Koreans say that within the next 35 to 40 days, North Korea will have a deliverable nuclear weapon that will be atop a ballistic missile capable of reaching the United States. What are we to do?
Well, Lou, the president just finished his fabulous tour in Asia, and he did exactly what he had to do, which is to reassure all of our partners in the region, all our allies, to say they're not alone. The last eight years of so-called strategic patience is over, and North Korea will not be allowed to threaten them nor us, whether it's Guam or whether it's the mainland U.S. When it comes to what else can be done, there's two very simple baskets of actions. Number one, numerous covert means that we can't discuss on television to undermine that capacity to do us damage. And the second is the expectation the president has with regards to Beijing. This whole problem could be solved within the next 10 minutes if Beijing wished to, because they could close off the faucets when it comes to energy and everything else that North Korea requires, and they would be brought to heel very rapidly. So we'll see if China's serious about reining in its crazy neighbor.
And we've got about 40 days in which to do that, apparently. If we take Kim Jong-un at the face value of his words, I'm not suggesting we do that in any way, but this is a continuing threat, and the window is narrowing, it seems. Is that correct?
It's been a constant progression to this final destination. This should surprise nobody. I cannot verify this information coming out of the South, but whether it's 40 days or whether it's 40 weeks makes no difference. This is the progression since the Clinton administration first decided to give in to nuclear blackmail with North Korea.
It appears it may have there may be a significant difference, if you will, for Kim Jong-un and North Korea, whether it's 40 weeks or 40 days, because the United States and this president seem to have one option that is off the table, and that is the option of waiting much longer, because this threat is existential, I think is the way to put it. Let's turn to this judge that persists, William Orrick III, a clever leftist judicial judge. I mean, I just can't get over the guy who thinks he's in charge of national security. And what are we facing here?
We're facing what really has been, the result of decades of the left pumping and packing the court, the benches, with their activist legal buddies. And if you read this ruling by the judge, even a first-year law student can see straight through it. The ruling states that the federal government has no right to act in such a way with regards to federal funds, with regards to cities that have different immigration strategies. That's the phrase the judge uses. Cities don't have immigration strategies. States. There's one thing in America that has immigration strategies, and it's called the federal government.
So,
I mean, it's just patently transparent and political.
Absolutely. Dr. Sebastian Gorka, great to see you. Thanks so much.
Lou.
Be sure to vote in our poll tonight. The question is, do you believe the American people should demand a full accounting of which lawmakers made payouts using the Congressional Settlement Slush Fund? Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Up next, another Democrat added to the growing list of mostly leftist creeps who will take up the Conyers sexual harassment allegations. Emily Campagno and Mark Simone join us here next. Stay with us. In our online poll last night, we asked you, are you outraged that the Border Patrol hasn't explained the murder of one of its agents near the Mexican border? 91% of you say yes, and hopefully we're going to see a change in attitude and conduct on the part of a government that's supposed to be serving the people. Well, joining me now, attorney Emily Campagno and radio talk show host on New York's WOR, Mark Simone. Good to have you both here. Emily, let's start with Judge Roy Moore, the president, not endorsing him, but also saying the man has denied the allegations straight up. Your thoughts on the equity of it all?
Right. I think people are used to the president at this point being very forthcoming with his opinion. And so I do believe that it's raising a lot of eyebrows here as he's chosen to stay silent, or that he's towed the line, right? And he hasn't been consistent. And I think especially in the present climate, what we need is consistency here, because on both sides of the aisle, we're seeing a lot of claims. And granted, they are claims until proven, but with a lot of these historical allegations, it's impossible to prove. And it behooves moving forward these elected officials to have a culture and maintain a culture of believing the victims first.
Believing the victims first, and they're entitled to be believed. Are the alleged perpetrators supposed to be believed, Emily? I mean, it's a very difficult thing to do, is to have a he said, she said, irrespective of the pattern or the cumulative weight of it all. People will make their decisions about who they believe, who they find most credible, right?
Absolutely. And that's part of the difficulty that I absolutely acknowledge. And I think the spectrum, that's why it is so difficult. But I do believe that the knee-jerk reaction of until there is specific proof, we have to believe the defense, that's caused in part the pervasive pattern and the troublesome pattern that we're seeing throughout the industries, including the Hill and the Senate, which has created even more, for example, of our coffers. You know,
Mark, we had Speaker Ryan come out and say he believes that the women in the Roy Moore case are more credible, are the credible voices. You know, I'm not even sure why the speaker was inserting himself into that, but at the same time, you had a president saying first that the people of Alabama should make the decision, and he's not endorsed Roy Moore, but he's saying that he also asserting that Roy Moore has denied the allegation.
I don't know what to think here, because I really don't know, but I've always found it's a good idea to use Paul Ryan as a reverse barometer of what to think. They usually come out all right. So,
well, you know, our experience hasn't varied too much.
Yeah, and you always want to sympathize with the victim if they are indeed a victim. We don't know that.
Absolutely.
It's so many years ago.
Yeah, it is so many years ago, and now we've got Conyers with two women now making claims against him, Emily. We find out there's a secret slush fund in the Congress and the Senate that $17 million of taxpayer money spent. How outrageous, how more outrageous can the Congress be than to create a fund to protect themselves at taxpayer expense from public knowledge of their misdeeds?
This is absolutely enraging to me, and in part because as a federal attorney for so many years, I was conscious that every single dollar of my salary and that I used was not mine. It was taxpayers. Those people are stewards of the taxpayer money. So the fact that it's being used.
Wait a minute, are you talking about Congress and the Senate? Are you talking about Ryan and McConnell? Really?
But yes, and the thing that's so troublesome to me, I will say this, that viewers need to understand the fact that there is no transparency into that slush fund or that process at all is what is frankly the cherry on top. So not only have millions of dollars of our taxpayer money gone to settling these harassment suits, but we have no visibility into it. And that is why the Ethics Committee probe is crucial. We need to understand what standards they can levy.
I do want to add one thing
exactly.
to this. Earlier in the broadcast, Congressman Ron DeSantis announced that he is going to put forward a bill next week to make sure it is transparent. Not only that, there will be transparency, but any money that was taken, taxpayer money, and used to make good these claims will be refunded by and paid for by the person who was involved in the sexual harassment or whatever the misdeed.
Yeah, and if they can spend $12 billion on a bridge that should have been $800,000, I'm not going to worry about the slush fund that much. But you know, they've got these rules. If you want to complain, you've got to wait 30 days. You've got to go through counseling for 30 days. They delay you for 90 days before you can file your complaint. They've got these rules in Congress. And the Senate Ethics...
You know, they got another rule, too. In addition to continuing the offense against women with those rules and in demanding that the perpetrator be kept secret and taxpayer money used to provide that, they also would insist without any hesitation at all that we just go about our business and just take another lesson in sexual harassment. I don't know how many of the Congress and the Senate showed up for those lessons.
Yeah. And
we'll find out. We're going to have to jump. Emily, thank you so much. Mark, thank you. Thank you for being with us tonight. Good night from New York.